A local town called Oztocan is in distress. They're ravaged by earthquakes and will eventually destroy the town and kill all who live there because a magical shard was taken from its sacred location. Only you and your party can take the shard back to its rightful place deep within an ancient tomb, not only to save the town, but also to stop an evil crime syndicate from desecrating it further. I'm John and you're watching Dragons and Flagons. Shard of the Accursed is an 8th level adventure in the anthology book Keys from the Golden Vault. If you're planning on playing this adventure in the future, or want to read it yourself, or think that knowing anything about this story in advance will spoil your experience in any way, back out now. I'm going to be digging deep into this adventure to not only help dungeon masters prepare, but also provide an overview and my thoughts to help you determine if you really want to play this game or not. This is not your typical heist adventure, but as the book puts it, more of a reverse heist. Rather than you stealing some valuable item or something, the characters are tasked with returning the Shard of Xeluan back to its rightful place, the heart of a petrified giant located within an ancient tomb, which is currently controlled by an evil crime syndicate. Long ago, a giant named Xeluan befriended a group of adventurers after they saved him from certain death when his kin attacked him and left him to die. After many great adventures and wonderful stories that they could tell around the campfire and every tavern in the land, the party eventually returned home, where they found great earthquakes and volcanoes erupting, threatening to destroy their entire town. Xeluan carved a citadel into the mountainside, creating a refuge for not only the heroes but also the entire town to hide in. But this alone was not enough. The destruction kept coming. So in a last-ditch effort, Xeluan hefted the citadel and all of the people and everything on his shoulders above his head and made the final sacrifice. He wove his life energy into the magic that protected this citadel, allowing it to withstand this onslaught, sacrificing himself to save thousands. When the dust settled and the people were safe, the adventurers tried everything they could to save Xeluan. Nothing worked, so they built a mausoleum around Xeluan's body to honor his sacrifice. The heroes continued to adventure, but as their time ended on this realm, they too were interred into Xeluan's tomb. When the last hero died, the tomb was sealed, and it stayed that way for centuries. As with everything, eventually, the story of these adventurers in Xeluan was lost to time, and the ruined citadel was all but forgotten. Nearly a century ago, a group of explorers found the ruins of the citadel, and its protective wards were still intact. They founded a settlement, and it grew into a thriving community. But with every city, there's also a seedy underbelly, and this city happens to be the host of a crime syndicate called the Onyx Scar. 2 decades ago, an elf named Rilago found crumbling journals and architectural plans in his family library that mentioned the tomb. He traveled to Oztocan, which is the name of this city, to try to do an excavation on what he's found, but the mayor of the town refused him. But on the other hand, the mayor's daughter, Aminta, overheard the conversation and became obsessed with finding the tomb. Years later, the mayor eventually passed, and his son, Tavio, was elected mayor in his place. By this time, Aminta had become involved with the Onyx Scar and persuaded Rilago to join her on her search for the tomb. At the same time, she convinced Tavio to overlook this endeavor. They found the tomb and Xeluan's petrified remains, but no treasure. In the hopes of gathering something of worth, they tried to destroy this giant's body, but found that it was indestructible. One day, Rilago was climbing around on this giant, and he was frustrated, so he struck out and he hit the giant's body, and it shattered. His chest caved in, and a shard flew out and stabbed him right in the heart. Unbeknownst to everyone, Rilago was an ancient descendant of one of the ancient heroes that Xeluan died to protect. The ring he was wearing was a family heirloom from an ancestor. When he punched the giant with the ring, he literally and symbolically broke Xeluan's heart, which weakened the magic that protected the giant's corpse. With the magic weakened, the giant's body began to deteriorate, which allowed Aminta to collect broken off pieces. These broken off pieces have become a profitable enterprise, and has also helped her raise in status with the Onyx Scar. If you like this sort of content, please consider liking and subscribing. This little action goes a long way in making more content like this possible. One of the main premises of the Keys from the Golden Vault is that the party is affiliated with an organization called the Golden Vault. The Golden Vault is a secret organization that rights moral wrongs, supports the virtuous underdog, and handles delicate situations local authorities don't want to touch. Their missions are often illegal, but always support a moral and just cause. If you're using the Golden Vault as a patron, the party will receive 3 items at the beginning of this adventure. They'll get their golden key, they'll also get the Shard of Xeluan, as well as a note explaining that the Golden Vault believes the shard is the heart of the problem. It has been taken from the tomb, and a criminal organization called the Onyx Scar has been plundering Xeluan's tomb and selling off its treasures. The shard has passed through many hands before the Golden Vault acquired it, and they need you to travel to Oztocan with the shard, descend into Xeluan's tomb, and return the shard to its rightful place. And they do give you one clue. There's a playwright named Leandro that's in the town that can provide additional information. If you're not using the Golden Vault, the adventure does provide a few ideas for you to get the characters involved, but basically, you just need to get the shard into the player's hands and somehow get them involved with the city. So I've mentioned the shard a few times, and maybe now is a good time to explain exactly what it is. The Shard of Xeluan is a 1 foot long shard of obsidian that has veins of silver and gold beneath its cold surface. While holding the shard, you can use it as a spellcasting focus, giving you a +1 to spell attacks. It also gives you a strength increase by 4, up to a maximum of 22. But there is a curse. After you've attuned to this item, if you roll a nat 1 on an attack, ability check, or saving throw, you gain a Shard's Misfortune, which is randomly rolled on a table, none of which are a good thing, but could offer some interesting gameplay. Once you have your shard and your mission and you enter into the town, the first person you're likely to meet is Leandro. Leandro is a tabaxi playwright who arrived in the town a few months ago and is working on a play inspired by the town's local legends. During his time here, he's learned a few things. First, the town has never felt earthquakes like this in years, but it's become common in recent weeks. While no damage has been done, the quakes are getting worse, and it's only a matter of time before someone gets hurt. He also knows about a few of the other NPCs that you're likely to meet: Rilago, Tavio, and Aminta. I promise you, I'm going to say these names differently every time, so I apologize in advance and I will try to be consistent, but this very likely will be the first mention about these characters to the PCs, and should help unlock the story just a little bit. Depending on how much time you want to spend with this adventure, you can add additional information, but out of the box, he'll tell the party the story of Rilago and how he claimed to have proof of a giant's tomb beneath the town, how he tried to mount an excavation, but the mayor wouldn't allow it, and Rilago basically stayed in town until he disappeared a few weeks ago, around that same time as when the earthquakes began. As for Tavio, he mentions that he's spoken with this new mayor, but the mayor became uncomfortable when he mentioned Rilago. But he doesn't believe he had anything to do with the disappearance, but he does think he might know something about it. As for Aminta, he explains that that's Tavio's sister. She commands the town guard, and there are rumors that she could potentially be involved romantically with Rilago. He does keep a few secrets to himself. He knows that Aminta is a member of the Onyx Scar. He is friends with the mayor and doesn't want any political misfortune to happen to him because of this, so he kind of keeps that Onyx Scar secret to himself. During his last meeting with the mayor, he confronted Tavio about all of this. Tavio got a bit flustered and finally broke a little bit and told him that he was visiting his sister Aminta in the tomb itself, and while in her quarters he was able to snatch a map. He gave it to Leandro for safekeeping. Long story short, while the party's having a conversation with Leandro, if they seem genuinely interested in stopping either the earthquakes or finding out what happened to Rilago, Leandro will give them the map. At this time, Leandro will also tell the party a little bit more about the research he's found, like the past heroes and such, kind of filling in the story a bit more. If at some point the party wants to go meet Tavio, he can be found in a large 2-story house with a few guards. He'll definitely see the party if an audience is requested, and he's very timid, easily manipulated. During the conversation, he'll start telling about his sister and how he wants her to stop desecrating this tomb. He'll also mention that all but a few of the guards are under his sister's control. Assuming that the party is going to explain that they're here to help, the mayor will also explain that Aminta needs more workers to help remove the precious stones from the tomb. This will give the party a possible way of entering into the tomb. He'll explain that the characters could really just pass as workers. They'll be searched on their way in, so they will have to go unarmed. But his 2 trustworthy guards can hide their gear in a chest within the workers' quarters where they can get them when they're needed. So now that the players have the map and they've got basic information from Tavio, this is really where you want to let the players kind of devise their own plan. Whether you let the players naturally find all of this information on their own, or you want to railroad them into it, eventually you'll need to provide them time to come up with a plan. Tavio has a plan for the party to infiltrate as workers, and the map will also provide 3 other possibilities: 2 ventilation shafts as well as a fountain entrance by coming in through a nearby grotto. But once the players have come up with a plan, help them out. Get them to that spot, and let's get this dungeon started. Up until this point, the vast majority of the adventure has been basically just roleplay, possibly some ability checks. That is unless you decide to throw some random encounter in somewhere. But let's get into the dungeon, or rather the tomb. The ceilings of this tomb are 15 feet high, except for the 40-foot high Great Chamber. The doors are typically made of iron reinforced wood and are kept locked. The guards carry keys to each of the doors on their level, and light is pretty scarce in this tomb. The vast majority is dark, except for the entrance and a few other scattered rooms throughout. If a member of your party doesn't have dark vision, this could become a wonderful exercise in caution, and should add a level of difficulty depending on how much they want to play into it. With multiple entrances, I'll go through each room in order as they're presented in the adventure, and with many pre-written adventures, not every room presents a threat or a possible major plot point to the story, but they are used to kind of flesh out the dungeon. As there are 22 rooms in this, I'll talk about them. I'm going to focus the majority of my time on the more impactful rooms. First up is the main entrance. The main entrance is reached by traveling through a 200-foot long natural cavern. If the characters are pretending to be workers, they'll have an armed escort of 5 veterans who will lead them through the iron doors and into the next room called the Vestibule. The Vestibule room is well lit by 4 torches mounted on pillars. In the center of the room is a table and several chairs in front of a vertical slab of granite. There are 4 veterans stationed near the pillars. Again, assuming the characters are pretending to be workers, this is where the guards will search them for armor and weapons before leading them further into the tomb. The characters can try to conceal a light weapon or smaller object with a successful sleight of hand check. From the vestibule, the guards will lead the party through an arrow slit hallway. This is a narrow hallway lined with arrow slits and 4 thugs behind the western wall. They'll shoot at anyone who passes through without an Onyx Scar escort, and these arrow slits provide 3/4 cover. The Great Chamber is where the guards from the vestibule will lead the characters if they're pretending to be workers. It's described as a dome chamber that's 40 feet tall with a 30-foot tall statue in the center. There's scaffolding all around the statue, which is the Mezzanine, which I'll talk about in a minute. The first time the character brings the shard of Xeluan into this room or into the Mezzanine, the ground will begin to shake and rubble will fall from the ceiling. Each creature within the area must make a DC 12 dex save or take 1d6 bludgeoning damage. If a character inspects Xeluan's body, they'll notice a large sliver is missing from the heart, and the shard of Xeluan would easily fit into it. What the characters don't know is they can't mend Xeluan's heart without the help of Rilago's ghost, found in the Crypt of the Watched, the last room that we'll be talking about. If they do try to place the shard into the heart without Rilago, it will fall out and do nothing. An Arcana check will tell them that a mystical force shattered the heart, and maybe the same force will help mend it. But keep in mind, they're not the only people in this room. Any attempt to climb on the giant will definitely cause some attention. What attention? That's totally up to you. Because also within this room are 1d6 plus 3 workers. One of those workers happens to be the Overseer. If the characters are pretending to be workers, then the Overseer will give them a task to do and send others away to rest in the workers' rest area. While the characters are working, they can try to get information from the workers with a successful intimidation check, which would really just tell them the last place that Aminta was seen was on the upper level. There's an elf named Edino who's conducting experiments with the giant's remains, and that he has a study in the west of this room. Finally, they'll know that there is an area on the east side of the temple that's kind of been sealed off due to a fungal infestation. There's a garden, a fountain, and a secret exit from the tomb in there. They heard all this from an Onyx Scar guard talking about it. Finally, in this room are crates full of chunks of Huskanite? I think that's how you say it. It's the giant's remains. These chunks can be used as spellcasting focus, granting a +1 to spell attacks. But on a nat 1, the chunk will shatter and the player will take 3d6 thunder damage. In the northeast of the Great Chamber is a barricaded door. The hallway contains 2 barricades, each one a floor-to-ceiling stack of wooden logs. A single character can remove the barricade in 30 minutes, but many hands make light work. This time could be reduced with multiple people working on it. The Onyx Scar barricaded this corridor after the Myconids in the Forgotten Garden attacked them. The Forgotten Garden is a large room, lightly obscured by clouds of spores, with a garden in the center of it. Within the garden is a staircase as well as a fountain. The fountain is one of the entrances into the tomb, and the stairs lead to the guest halls upstairs. The door to the guest hall at the top of the stairs is protected by an arcane lock spell, but a DC 25 dex check using thieves' tools will unlock it, as well as a DC 25 athletics check. Of course, the knock spell will do the trick as well. In the three corners of this garden are shrines containing statues representing gods of nature and protection. They're really just here for flavor, but potentially could provide some sort of cover because there are 2 Mycadid sovereigns, 4 Mycadid adults, and a shambling mound roaming this room. If someone in the party has a passive perception of 16 or higher, they will notice them. Otherwise, you could possibly have your first encounter. Playing out this counter, unless the party makes an absurd amount of noise, I really wouldn't worry too much about guards or workers hearing anything. They're probably used to noise coming from this room, and there's a shambling mound after all. And the guards could just easily assume that there's a scuffle with all of the little critters that are living in this room. Moving further south from the Forgotten Garden, the party will enter into another hallway. Within there, they'll find one of the ventilation shafts that lead into the tomb. At the end of the hall is a small chamber that once housed shrines to the god, but they've all been smashed and ruined. Hidden in this room is a secret door leading to the eastern side of the arrow slit hallway. Luckily, there's no one on that side. Now moving back into the Great Chamber. On the northwest is another corridor, and that leads to the living quarters. Broken into the north and south quarters, the north includes 5 sleeping thugs, 1 per room, and the south contains 5 unoccupied rooms. Each room contains a cot with an oil lamp hanging above it. The living quarters corridor also leads to the storage room. This is a room where Tavio's guards will store the character's gear if they're pretending to be workers. Also within this room contains a weapons rack, wooden crates, and a door leading to the north. In the center of the room is a staircase leading to the history room. The northern door leads to Edino's study, which is warded by an alarm spell that will mentally alert Edino if anyone touches it. So right behind that study door is a clay golem. It doesn't wait for the characters to enter into a room before attack, and Edino is hiding in the back of the room with greater invisibility cast on himself. If the characters kill the golem, he continues to hide until he can sneak to the war room to alert Aminta. Within the room on Edino's desk, there are Oscanite pieces, 1 on the desk and 3 more in the drawers. An Arcana check will sense a life force is trapped inside these pieces, but it won't really tell how to release it. The characters will learn about that in the Crypt of the Watched from Rilago. Now it's up to you if you want to guide the party into taking these pieces. They will need them to complete this adventure, but it can also be kind of fun to make them come back for it. Honestly, it really depends on how much time you want to spend with this adventure itself. Finally, there are books in this room, but only one that has any importance. Edino left his spell book, and it contains all the spells from a mage stat block plus a few others. On the other side of the hall from the storage room is the mess hall. The door is closed, but loud voices and laughter can be heard from the door. Within the room are 4 thugs, 2 veterans, and a dwarven bartender with the spy stat block. If they detect intruders, they will draw their weapons and attack. The bartender will throw flasks of alchemist fire, flavored as flaming bottles of alcohol, and will also have 3/4 cover. This room could really disrupt the entire adventure. So my advice is to allow the party to try to talk their way out of it if they get into a bad situation. The alternative is turning a heist adventure into a large siege or fight, because this brawl would surely let everyone in the tomb know that there's something going on. Finally, in the living quarters area is the workers' rest area. There are dozens of bedrolls scattered on the floor. Some of the bedrolls have workers in them. At a minimum, there are at least 4 workers resting in this room. None of them are interested in helping the characters, and more importantly, none of them are interested in making enemies with the Onyx Scar. The southeast corridor of this room leads to the Reconstructed Shrine. About halfway down the corridor is a rusty iron gate, which is the second ventilation shaft. The Reconstructed Shrine is a place for the workers to worship while they're in the tomb. The gods are completely up to you in the world that you've put them in. There's a secret door that can be found with a perception check. Behind the door are the thugs from the arrow slit hallway, which will attack on sight. In the storage room, there was a set of stairs. Leading up those stairs gets you to the history room. This is a small circular room with etchings on the wall that tell the story of Xeluan. Down the hallway from the history room is the upper west antechamber. Within this room, there are 2 doppelgangers, and they look exactly like Aminta, assuming that the party knows what she looks like. Otherwise, they're females in leather. They are just sitting there playing cards, passing the time. If they see 3 or more characters, They will attempt to retreat to the war room, otherwise they'll stand and fight. Within this room there are 3 exits, doors to the north and the south, and a corridor to the east. The doors to the south lead to the Treasury, which is trapped with a capsule containing poisonous gas. Aminta has the key, which will open the door without setting off the trap. Otherwise, a DC 20 investigation check will detect the trap, and thieves' tools can pick the lock. The northern door in the upper west antechamber leads to Aminta's quarters. These quarters contain a bed and clothing hanging on hooks, dinnerware stacked on top of a wooden table, and a wine rack that includes 2 bottles of exquisite wine for 100 gold pieces each, stands against the wall. Under the bed is a small coffer that holds 6 gemstones, 50 gold piece each. If for some reason the characters decide to take the wine with them, and if they don't have a bag of holding or some other magical way of collecting these wine bottles, even if you're not playing with encumbrance, find out how they're planning on storing these items. You could use this as something that could cause a clanging sound or some sort of dinging when the characters are moving about, maybe disadvantage on stealth checks, or they could also break during the fight, soaking them in wine, which in theory could give advantage to other NPCs when doing a perception check by smell. The southern door in the upper west antechamber leads to the Treasury. Poison gas or not, this room contains a desk and 4 wooden chests. The desk is a single drawer that contains a ledger detailing how much money the Onyx Scar has invested in the tomb's excavation so far. The 4 chests are unlocked. Each contains 2,500 gold pieces each, which is used to pay the workers, bribe town guards, and keep operations running smoothly. If you're using this adventure as part of a larger story, the ledger could become some important plot point moving forward. Otherwise, this is more just fun flavor. The eastern corridor from the upper west antechamber leads to the Mezzanine. This is a platform that kind of circles Xeluan's statued remains. There are 4 heavy stone doors, north, south, west, and east, that revolve on a vertical axis. The east and the west doors are open, but the north and the south, while they're not locked, if they are open, they will grind loudly, attracting attention for anyone on the upper floor and in the Great Chamber. Leading north from Aminta's quarters or from the mezzanine itself in the northern door, the party will find themselves in the war room. In the center of this room is a long wooden table with an ornate throne-like chair at the end. Seated in this chair is Aminta, wearing leather armor, and with her are 2 veterans, described as her generals. It's possible that Edino and the 2 doppelgangers are here as well. If the characters are pretending to be workers, Aminta will yell at them to leave, but if they pose any sort of threat, she'll call for her doppelgangers, assuming they're not already in here, and Aminta will fight until she's reduced to about 10 hit points or fewer. Edino will do the same, but the veterans and the doppelgangers, they're going to fight to the death, in an effort to not only allow Aminta to escape, but also to prove their worth. So once the fighting's over, or the room is emptied for some reason or whatever, and the characters have a minute to investigate, they'll see that there is a secret door to the guest hall that can be found behind a bookshelf. On the eastern side of the mezzanine, through the open door, is the food storage. This room contains all the food and drink to keep the entire operation running. There is an invisible stalker that floats near the ceiling. It won't do anything unless the players disturb the supplies. Entering into the Great Hall from the food storage, the characters will see a large table with several chairs. 6 doors are evenly spaced along the east and west walls. Against the south wall, set into the floor, is a wooden trapdoor that leads to the Forgotten Garden. In the northern portion of this room is a secret door, which leads to the secret door in the war room behind the bookshelf. Each of the doors on the east and the west wall lead to small guest rooms for prominent members of the Onyx Scar when they're here doing business. But for this game, they're empty. Mechanically speaking, there's nothing of great interest in this room. It can be a shortcut from the Forgotten Garden or possibly through the war room secret door. The final room is the Crypt of the Watched. It can be found going through the southern door on the mezzanine. It's a large burial chamber, and immediately upon entering, a voice says, "Hush, come no closer, or you will wake the angry spirits." Within this room are the earthly remains of Xeluan's 4 companions. If the characters do not heed the warning and just walk on in, 4 wraiths will emerge from their crypts and begin attacking. If the party doesn't enter the room, Rilago will greet the characters, and he'll explain what's going on and how he's responsible, and he believes together him and the rest of the party can save the town from destruction. Rilago will also explain the whole story. By this time, the party should know the majority of it, but this will really fill in any gaps. He'll also explain how Edino trapped the spirits in chunks of Oztocanite, and how the party must take those to Xeluan's statue and touch the pieces to it, at which point the shards will turn into dust and the spirits will be freed. Once the spirits have been freed, the character is safely able to enter into the crypt, at which point Rilago will explain the only way to mend the heart is to allow him to possess one of the character's bodies. If they agree, at that point, he'll be able to leave the crypt and he'll take the shard to the body and place the shard back into the heart. From here, the character will gain control of itself and Rilago will finally rest in peace. At this point, the adventure is all but concluded. If Xeluan's heart is mended, the earthquakes all stop. You could totally continue this adventure or tie some of those plot hooks into your own adventure. The Onyx Scar shouldn't be too happy about what you've just done. You also have the Ledger, and you can potentially expose the horrible deeds that the Onyx Scar's done and maybe even get to the highest levels of the organization through it. Well, that about wraps this one up. What do you think of this adventure? Is it something that you'd like to play at your table? What are some of the highlights that you heard? What do you think could be better? I'd love to hear your comments. If you've made it this far, please consider liking, subscribing, and doing all the normal things. And until next time, thanks.